curiously enough, as long as I can remember, I wanted to study physics of all things. I wanted to be a physics professor. First thing I can remember. And I don't know if it came from reading a biography, a children's book, a biography of Albert Einstein when I was a kid, or if it was because one of my best friends as a kid was named Al. I have no idea, but I do remember the physics professor thing intrigued me. I enjoyed science quite a bit, and I always wanted to teach. So I don't really know how we got on the path of automotive sales, except for the fact that I found out early in my college days that I was pretty bad at math. So theoretical physics, while not needing all the math in the world, didn't have to be the complete expert. Einstein needed help with his math. You needed some, and I really didn't have any. So that wasn't something that was going to work out very well for me. So we had to do something a little bit different. And we got into sales. My parents had a lighting store, a residential lighting store, and started selling those. And moving along, college didn't work out real well, and I found myself at 25 years old sitting in a bar, imagine that, with a buddy of mine, an acquaintance of, I don't know, a year or two ago. We were catching up, and found out he was selling cars. And I said, "How do you like it?" He said he loved it. He said, "You should come by and interview." He said, "You can make some really good money." I said, "Well, that sounds wonderful. I think I'll do that." And I went and interviewed. So I was kind of curious how things can come full circle in life. I interviewed with a general sales manager. It was like I think it was my third interview at that facility, and it ended up 19 years later that I was general sales manager in that very same office, and that was kind of pretty interesting, a full circle or a story, but we'll get into that. So I started selling cars at 25 years old, 1991, give away the age. Yeah, I'm getting up there. But, really enjoyed it, and it was more of a casual thing for me, as it is with a lot of people, I think, maybe even a stopgap until you get into it a little bit more, and the light switch goes on. And it did for me after about 3 years or 4 years, and I knew I could get really good at this. Well, I didn't take it very seriously when I first started. Didn't like word tracks. You read that in my book as well. I wasn't a fan of them, thought I was better than that. But then they started to intrigue me, and all the parts of steps of the road to the sale started to intrigue me. So I studied them, particularly the word tracks, and how I could influence my customers a little bit more, engage them, and see what the results would be. I changed different word tracks. I changed my delivery of different word tracks, and try to see what the response might be and how it would be different with different deliveries. So that was the beginning of what you see now, basically, is that intrigue or fascination with the sales process, even more so than just following it, but really what made it up and how it can be improved and get better. At any rate, I sold at that store for 8 years, and again, after the light switch went on, which I'm a firm believer it can go on at any time as long as you have some natural talent and you work at it, finally it becomes relatively easy for you. And it's simply, people are going to see value in what you provide or they won't. They're going to buy it or they won't. And everything got very simple after that. But at any rate, I wanted to become a manager. And not for all the reasons everybody wants to be a manager. They got manageritis. It wasn't for the money or whatever, or the supposed power, but it was for influence. I wanted to get into management so that I could help, so I could influence more of the process. Because as a sales consultant, particularly not a very committed one initially at that store, the influence wasn't there. Nobody really pays attention, nor really should they, until you start following the process correctly and take things seriously. That being said, we went to a different facility, began taking things a bit more seriously, and was promoted to floor manager at a Hyundai store, a relatively small Hyundai store, although closed on 100 units a month, new and used out of that store, 70 plus new Hyundais at that time. But the structure was different. So when I first got promoted, I was promoted to floor manager. Now, what was a floor manager? Well, that store was set up with a general manager, a finance manager, and me. And my job was to manage the sales staff as best I could, do follow-up, and the biggest thing was the way the structure was set up. The sales consultants would initiate the road to the sale. In other words, they do the meet and greet, they do the needs assessment, the presentation, the demonstration, and they do a trial close. And once they got the commitment from the customer, then the general manager would desk the deal, and guess who would present numbers? I would. All of them. And I remember, going over the job description, and when I was first being considered for that, I'm thinking to myself, I have to close all of these people, and that's really what it became. And then, all of a sudden, the passion came out. It was like a spark. I was good at it. I could influence the people. I could engage with them. I could get them to buy the cars for everybody. So you go into a situation where you're closing 70, 80 deals in a month as a floor manager. Now, yes, of course, the great salespeople or the good salespeople at that store set me up wonderfully and did most of the work. A lot of times, I'm not saying anything different than that, but you learn a lot about closing. And that was something that I'll never forget, and that experience was great. Now, while I was doing that, I was being trained for finance. And I'll never forget him. I'll use his name here. I hope he doesn't mind. Frank Phillips. I will thank you now, and for always I will be grateful for what you taught me at that store. And I was being groomed for the finance department in the big building, which was on the same block. At a later date, it happened a little bit sooner than I would have expected or really wanted. I wasn't quite ready for it at the time. But anyway, I was there for a certain period of time. One of the first things I did, and this is before CRMs or anything like that, they had the big logbook, the long logbook that nobody would really use properly. They'd write all their ups in at the end of the day and hope that was sufficient, and then the sales managers would make their calls when everybody was slow, and the owners would come by, or the general sales manager would ask, what have you guys been doing, and we're making our phone calls. I got rid of that. I created a different type of logbook that was very similar to the one I used as a sales consultant, which really tightly tracked the processes. In other words, what step were you at with that particular customer? And that was just a long version, a handwritten version of the CRMs we have today. Did you do a presentation? Did you do a demonstration? Did you get to the write-up, which would include a trade appraisal, if that was part of it? Did you close them? Now, once they're closed, did you deliver them? So that was something that really helped our numbers because we were right on top of it. But moving forward, after only about 2 or 3 months, an opening became available at the main store, and they moved me into finance. After a short period there, they moved me to the Ford desk, and this was very rapid. Then after that, they transferred me to be new and used car manager at a Mazda Hyundai facility that the group owned. So this all happened very rapidly, and quite frankly, I wasn't mature enough for it. I had not developed any real leadership skills. Everything was old school, heavy-handed, and not as helpful as I should be, or definitely not as nurturing as we would become. But these things improved as time went on. Now, after that, I had ended up at a Saturn facility in 2000, I think it was 2002. Now, this was a big switch for me. I was hired as a used car manager. Hadn't really done that solely before. Remember, my rise or ascension or what have you was too rapid to really grasp everything. So this was the first attempt for me to really wrap my hands around the used car business. But it was a great learning opportunity. And but something was different about Saturn. And say what you will, there's a lot of different viewpoints about the sales process there, the non-negotiation. Well, do the salespeople have to be great salespeople? Well, they don't have to be wonderful closers, because it is one price, although that's the impression. I believe they do have to be great closers as well, but the presentation part and the selling of the philosophy is the biggest thing, or was the biggest thing for that group, and they did it well. But I do remember my very first day there, I knew I had to change my demeanor and my management style, because I did 3 trade appraisals in the morning, and then when I looked around, none of the salespeople for whom those appraisals were done had customers. I was like, what happened to your customers? Well, they weren't ready to buy yet. Well, this was foreign to me because I was used to a mandatory turn. I was used to a little bit more of a process than that was, a little bit more tight process than that was. So I had to learn and reinvent myself. And again, it's not such a bad thing to reinvent yourself. But anyway, I spent 3 years as a used car manager and then 5 years as a new car manager at the Saturn facility. But this is where the sales training, Hamilton sales training, really took off, or not took off, but the idea hit. So we were having difficulty. I thought we could close more car deals, and I found that the sales consultants weren't really asking for the business, which is huge. That's number 1 and 2 reasons is if we're not on the right car, we don't ask for the business. So how could I get them to ask for the business and feel good about it. Because I'll tell you what, there was a prevailing opinion that you had to have a right to ask for the business. Well, I agree with that, but create that right. Do the proper process and the proper steps and get there. So at any rate, I came up with, well, why don't we go ahead and continue with the paperwork? In other words, that was the way to let the customer know you're asking for the business. They knew what you were doing, and they knew if they said yes, they bought the car. You didn't have to say, well, can we put this in your garage today, or do you want to buy the car? Although I still love, would you like to buy the car? It's that simple. And I think everybody should ask that several times. But this seemed to help. As we taught them later to counter, transition, and close, a closing question, shall we go ahead and continue with the paperwork, worked wonderfully for the sales team. And that was the beginning. Now, in a piece of just terrible marketing, I came up with the program, You Don't Have to Say No, and this is for Saturn facilities. Oh, by the way, Saturn had decided at that time with the training through GM to try an assertive sales approach rather than the consultative sales approach. That was supposed to be new. Well, guess what? It's been assertive for as long as I can remember, before that as well. So that wasn't new to me, and it's not that difficult. You ask for the business, you go through the proper steps, it's real simple. The best sales process is a combination of everything, and that's what I teach, and you'll find that out and you'll see that. So at any rate, I came up with the You Don't Have to Say No program. The reason I came up with You Don't Have to Say No is because that's what our salespeople found themselves having to say, or they did say that quite a bit, whenever the customer asked, well, can you discount the price? Can you do any better? No. Can you take $500 off? No. Will you take even $100 off? No. And that's not the way you sell anything, is by having a negative response. So we came up with some statements that would help them not have to say no. In other words, Saturn chose a no hassle, no haggle environment. And that helped very much so as far as not having to say the words no. Also, Saturn chose a culture that does not include negotiation, was another one. At Saturn, it's simple and easy for everyone. We had these statements that would allow the salespeople to go ahead and move forward in the sale without having to say no. And that was what the platform or foundation of the program was. At any rate, the neat part about this whole program was that it was brand specific and time sensitive. Whoops, not too bright on my part. We all have failures. That was an interesting one because Saturn went out of business and the material is no good anymore. So anybody that wants one of those old copies can just email me and I'll go ahead and ship one off to you. I still have them. So for nostalgia, maybe at some point in the future, you would like that. So moving forward. After that, we went into something a little bit different. I went up to a Honda store and was a sales manager up there. One of the best experiences I've ever had at a store. And my second weekend there, I did a sales meeting. It was about 30, 45 minutes, and utilized some of the principles of You Don't Have to Say No. And they really enjoyed it, and I bonded immediately with the sales consultants. And again, that became just a wonderful experience. In fact, for the 2.5 months I was there, and I know that initially 2.5 months, again, it was something that was very special. I ended up going back to that store at a later date. Anyway, so here it was, 2010, and I was hired after the short stint at the Honda store as GSM at the facility I started this business. And so it was kind of neat, and I was hired with the knowledge that I have full control over the sales process. I can change it, and I did, and utilized a lot of the philosophies that you're going to see now in Hamilton Sales Training, a lot of the philosophies that came later in 2013 as I started developing Beyond the Walkaround. So it's going to be a lot of fun, but the whole idea behind Hamilton Sales Training, and you'll see in other videos and read and listen, is to evolve the business. It should be a more professional business, and it should be very simple. There are simple matters that come about that we really don't know how to handle properly right now, but we will. So follow me. So sometime after that, I had an opportunity to take a little bit of time off and decided to write Beyond the Walkaround. And it has had wonderful reviews, wonderful success. Thank you so much to everybody who's purchased the book and purchased it on audio as well. It's been great. The feedback has been wonderful. And that is where we are now with Hamilton Sales Training. That's why I want to do this. I'm not interested right now in going into fixed operations or training BDC. This is all about the sales consultant and helping anybody who wants to learn become elite. with some new concepts and newer ideas that you haven't seen before. So follow me. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope to hear from you soon. Take care.